A Legend of the Northland by Phoebe Cary. A Legend of the Northland is a ballad. A ballad is a poem narrating a story in short stanzas. There are 16 stanzas in this poem, and each stanza consists of 4 lines. Ballads are a part of folk culture and passed on orally from one generation to the next. Folk culture comprises of traditional stories which are passed on from one generation to next generation. This story is of the Northland area, the area which is near the North Pole. And the word legend means a historical story, one which is very old and has been passed on from generation to generation. Let's read the poem and explain it in detail. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. In the first stanza, the poet says that in the region around the North Pole, that is Northland, the duration of the day is very less because its position is such that the sun's rays reach for a very less time. When this area is experiencing winter season, the duration of the night is very long and the daytime hours are very less. In line 4, they refers to the people who live in this region. The poet says that the duration of the night time is so long that the people cannot sleep them through. If they go to bed, take a few hours of sleep and then they wake up, it is still night time. He wants to emphasize on the fact that the duration of the night is very long. Next stanza. Where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. In this stanza, we will get more idea about this Northland. The Northland region experiences severe cold conditions. It's a very snowy area. The reindeer is an animal which is found in this polar region. People tie the reindeers to sledges and then the reindeers pull the sledges. The poet adds that the children look like young ones of a bear because they wear funny looking clothes made of fur, which is like the furry skin of a bear. Third stanza. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it's true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. In line 1, they refers to the parents or elders, and them refers to the children or the younger generation. The elders of the Northland region tell a strange and interesting story to the younger generation. The poet says that he doesn't think that the story is true, but if he tells the story to the reader, maybe the reader could learn a lesson from it. The story gives an important message. Stanza 4. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching, just as he did, you know. The story is about Saint Peter. When Saint Peter used to live in the world and went around giving religious lectures to the people just like all saints do, then an incident happened. Stanza number 5. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. When Saint Peter was moving around the world, giving religious lectures to the people, he reached the door of a cottage where a small woman was making cakes. She was baking the cakes in the fireplace. Stanza 6. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. As Saint Peter had not eaten anything the entire day, he was very hungry and was feeling weak. So he went to this woman who was baking cakes, and he asked for one cake out of the many cakes that she had baked. Stanza 7. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. In this stanza, we can see that the woman was selfish. She did not give cake from her store. Instead, she started making a very small cake for Saint Peter. She did not want to share her things, but when she put the cake for baking, she looked at it and thought that this cake was too big to be given to someone. Stanza 8. Therefore she needed another and still a smaller one, but it looked when she turned it over as large as the first had done. The little miser woman thought that the cake was too big to be given away, so she started making another smaller cake. When she looked at that cake, she again felt that it was as big as the previous one. Again, she was not ready to give this smaller cake to Saint Peter. Stanza 9. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer, but she couldn't part with that. The third time, she took a very small amount of dough and rolled it. The poet says that she rolled and rolled to lay emphasis on the fact that she rolled the dough and made it very thin like a wafer and baked it. But she was so greedy that she could not give that thin piece of bread to the Saint Peter. Stanza 10. For she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. Here the woman reasoned that when she ate the cakes, she felt that they were very small. But if she had to give them to someone, she felt that they were too big to be given away. She put all the cakes on the shelf of her kitchen, and she did not give any cake to Saint Peter. Stanza 11. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. Saint Peter became angry. He was very hungry. He was feeling very weak, and the selfish woman was not ready to give him even a small cake. This behavior of the greedy woman angered the saint. Stanza 12. And he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm. Saint Peter cursed the woman and said that she was very selfish. She did not deserve to live like a human being. He also added that God had given her food shelter, fire to keep warm. But she had become selfish for all the resources she had. She did not want to share them with anybody. Stanza 13. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. Saint Peter cursed the woman that she would become a bird because she did not deserve the human form. She shall become a bird, and just like birds build their houses by boring into the wood. Here, boring means making the hole, and collect very little food by working hard the entire day. And similarly, she would also work hard in the dry wood all day and get little food and make a small place for herself to live in. Stanza 14. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. As soon as Saint Peter cursed the woman, she did not get a chance to speak for herself, because that very moment she flew up to the roof through the chimney and flew out in the form of a bird. Saint Peter's curse had converted the woman into a bird. Stanza 15. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burned, black as a coal in the flame. When the woman turned into a bird, at that time she was wearing a red-colored cap on her head. This cap was there on the bird's head also, but the woman's remaining clothes had burned and turned black in color just like coal. Now let's get into the final stanza of the poem. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the woods, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. In the final stanza of the poem, the poet says that people who live in the countryside, even the small children who go to school, seen this kind of bird in the woods. They see that she stays there all day and keeps on digging the wood with her beak to collect her food. Whenever any child sees this kind of bird, then his elders tell him this story. They say that the bird used to be a woman earlier. She was very greedy, and so she was cursed by Saint Peter and turned into a bird. They get a teaching that they should not be greedy. That is the greatest message passed through this poem.